Good evening, it's 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, December 21st. I'll call to order this regular meeting of the Cuyahoga Falls City School District Board of Education. Ms. Stoikoy, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Coco?
Here.
Mr. Gomez?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Ms. Schaefer?
Here.
Ms. White?
Here.
Thank you. Item B, approval of agenda. Number 1, motion to approve the agenda. It's recommended the Board of Education approve the agenda of the December 21st, 2022 Board of Education meeting. Action by the Board of Education, adoption of a consent agenda means that all items are adopted by one singular motion unless a member of the Board of Education, Treasurer, or Superintendent requests that any such item be removed from the consent agenda and voted upon separately.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Ms. Coco?
Aye.
Mr. Gomez?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Ms. Schaefer?
Aye.
Ms. White?
Aye.
Thank you. Item C, opening ceremony. Welcome. Our vision, Cuyahoga Falls City Schools, the hub of our community, committed to a culture of caring. We innovate, we create, we personalize education for all. Our mission, every student, every day, every opportunity. Number 2, informational items. This meeting is a meeting of the Cuyahoga Falls Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business. It is not a public community meeting, although there are opportunities for public participation. If an individual wishes to address the board regarding a topic found on the meeting agenda, the individual must complete a registration form found inside the attendance notebook and present it to the treasurer. Following the introduction of the topic by the board president, followed by board discussion, the individual will be recognized. If an individual wishes to address the board regarding a topic not found on the meeting agenda, they must notify the superintendent and or board president of the topic no later than 3 business days in advance of the meeting. These individuals may share their comments during the board business portion of the agenda. In both cases, the individual will preface comments by announcement of their name and address and limit comments to 3 minutes. All statements should be directed to the board president. No person may address or question board members individually. In addition, in public session, the board will not hear complaints about school personnel nor against any person connected with the school system. An unabridged board agenda for this meeting can be found on your electronic device at the address shown on the screen. For your convenience, hard copies of the board agenda may be found on the table by the sign-in book. The annual organizational meeting of the Cuyahoga Falls Board of Education is on Wednesday, January 11, 2023 at 5:15 p.m. here in the Cuyahoga Falls High School Library, and the next regularly scheduled meeting of the Cuyahoga Falls Board of Education will immediately follow at 5:30 p.m. Now for our Pledge of Allegiance, Ms. White.
Yes, if you'll please rise and say the pledge with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you. IMD presentations. We have one presentation tonight. It's our Student Wellness and Success presentation and update with Dr. Cruz and Mrs. Merkel. So I'll invite them to come up.
Please hold the applause. Okay, so we gave you a folder there with some handouts that we'll go through as we present. So thank you for inviting us to present tonight. We value this time to be able to highlight some of the things that we're doing, to be able to share some of the data with you and this really important work. So tonight we have 3 parts to our presentation. Talk a little bit about something we've talked quite a bit about already, that whole child approach and multi-tiered systems of support. We'll jump into the student data, taking a look at attendance data, the results of our panorama survey, and then student support referrals, and then a little bit about using the data. And then finally, we'll look at some of the supports that we have in place and some of the direction that we're going. So starting with our whole child and MTSS.
So at this point, most of you, hopefully all of you, have seen this ODE whole child framework. And oftentimes it's misunderstood as something separate from academics or education getting, soft. But really, when we start thinking about some of the current challenges that we have in education, it really is the foundation for how we start to tackle some of these issues. So first and foremost is safety, right? We hear a lot about school safety, and the research really tells us that when we have welcoming, supportive schools, they're safer, right? That doesn't mean it's going to solve all of our problems, but it is a key piece of tackling the school safety issue. The second kind of issue that we hear a lot about is this learning loss, right? And as we learn more and more about the neuropsychology of how we retain information and are able to access higher parts of our brain, we know that when kids are feeling supported, welcomed in their buildings, they're able to fully access their curriculum. So they're able to tap into that academic rigor in a way that they can't if they're still struggling with trauma or they're not connected to their school buildings. So this whole child framework really lays a nice foundation for helping address that learning loss. The third piece, chronic absenteeism, which we're going to spend some time talking about today. But again, the same idea that when kids are connected to their school, to the adults in the building, when they feel safe and welcomed, they want to show up for school. And then last is mental health and behavioral health challenges. We know this is across the country. Schools are struggling to help students with mental health and behavioral health challenges. And the whole child framework, again, is that foundation to figure out how do we put tiered supports in place to really support our students through some of these issues.
Can I ask a question? How are we, in terms of this, how do we define learning loss? Is it that they're actually losing information that they have previously gained, or is it that they're not gaining information at the grade level that they should?
In my mind, it was sort of the loss from the pandemic, right? From when they were hybrid or online, and just sort of all the negative outcomes that have happened since the pandemic. That's how I was defining it, but Dr. Cruz might have a different.
No, I agree. I think it's more of the second way that you were asking about, thinking about that we're not making the adequate progress that we should be.
Thank you.
So this is a graphic, as we've talked about, this is most of this presentation, or much of it, was shared at our district leadership team, and this was a graphic that we spent a little bit of time talking about. So the umbrella of MTSS, this approach of using a multi-tiered system, is something that we see, or that we try to approach our academics, our social emotional, and our behavioral data and intervention. So this sort of captures that. So the definition of this is, MTSS is defined as the practice of providing high quality instruction and interventions matched to student need, monitoring progress frequently to make decisions about changes in instruction or goals, and applying child response data to important educational decisions. And when we think about that approach with academics, behavior, and that social emotional, that all applies, that we want to make data-informed decisions, and we want to have a tiered approach to supporting each of those areas. And when we consider each of those areas equally, and that's that whole child approach. So this is that pyramid. Again, not something new, but I really liked how this showed that academic, behavioral, and that wellness piece there. When we think about those three tiers, tier 1 is what everyone has access to. So whether that's for this sake, for the whole child and that wellness side, it would be all of those PBIS supports that are in place in the school. So all those rules and guidelines and expectations, or some of the access to the counselors. So just really what everyone has access to is that tier 1 level of support. And then as we move up, we have targeted intervention. So students who have more specific needs, we have resources and interventions in place for tier 2, and then tier 3 would be the most critical needs.
All right, so we're going to dive a little bit into our student data. We're going to start with the Ohio attendance laws. I'm sure you are all familiar with these terms, but we wanted just to kind of go over them real quickly because as we start diving into the data, I think it'll help kind of connect some of the dots. So the first line on here is chronic absenteeism. This is what's reported on our state report card, and it is defined as 10% of total hours either excused or unexcused. So that is roughly about 2 days a month. And the research really shows that when students miss those 2 days a month, that's when they really start to have significant impact on their academic outcomes. The next two rows, excessive absences and habitual truancy. That comes out of House Bill 410. So that is how the law defines students who are struggling to come to school and outlines what we as a district have to do to intervene. So for excessive absences, we are required to notify the parent. For habitual truancy, we are required to not only notify them, but also work with the family and student to come up with a plan to address barriers and help them kind of reintegrate back into school. So for excessive and habitual truancy, some of the things that we've worked on over the past couple of years is really shifting from this mindset of punitive and legal to supportive. How can we reach the student and family where they're at and help them get back to school? So for example, we worked with Chris Shaw this year to revise the letters that are really in line with best practices, what ODE is putting out as suggested letters for families. So those are some of the ways that we're like constantly trying to refine some of our practices to make sure that we're doing what's best for our students.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
About the required to notify for excessive absences. And I was another thing, it says unless absence is medically excused. So you still have, even if it's medically excused, are we still required to notify?
If we have a doctor's note,
Yeah.
I do not think so.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna be honest with you, Chris Shaw handles the in the weeds of a lot of these things, but yeah. For the chronic absenteeism, though, it doesn't matter what the reason is, yeah. Okay, so this next slide is right off our report card. Unfortunately, we did have 30.6% of our students who were chronically absent last year. This is unfortunately in line with where the state average was, which was 30%. So certainly this is an area that we want to improve on, that we're tackling, but we're not too far off what the state average was. According to ODE, we should have been about 22.1%. That was sort of the target for 21-22, and next year the target lowers a little bit more and it'll be 20.2. So we were not really held accountable this year on our state report card, but we will be next year.
Do we know how much of that 30.6 COVID and the, quarantining and all of that played into that 30.6%? Do we have any?
It certainly did. I don't have exact numbers for you, but certainly, yeah.
Do we know where we're at year to date? We're at the halfway point. What's our percentage?
I don't have the percentage. We could get that for you because we are tracking it. I don't know off the top of my head, but we can let you know. We have seen the way it's been tracking. We have seen some improvement in some areas, but not all. Do you want to speak to that?
I'm sorry,
Just the
before you
number.
want, Ms. Schaefer, can you ask your question again? I may have an answer for you. What was your question?
With the people that were with excessive absences, it
Yeah.
says it's required by the state to notify families. But then it says
Yeah,
on the
excused
thing,
or unexcused?
the absence is, unless the absence is medically excused. I was wondering if the parents still get notified of the absenteeism, but it's not.
Yeah, I'm unclear if we do that here. We used to notify them one way or another, whether it was excused or unexcused, just to give them a heads up, but sometimes we would get those calls, and sometimes I felt like we were being insensitive because it was maybe a child was in the hospital, had some chronic illness, like seriously hospitalized, and we kind of, I didn't feel, we looked real good not knowing that information, but we could find that out. I'm not sure if we do that here, but I wasn't sure if I heard your question right.
Wouldn't there be a point at which that child might then qualify for like a home instruction though? If they're chronically ill or?
If it's most likely like an other health impaired child, like has some protections, yes, we could do some things, yes, we could write that into, you'd have to write into the IEP and all that, but yes, it can be done and has been, yeah.
Can I ask another question since we're stopped for a second? The chronic absence, is that people that were chronically absent, excessively absent, and then habitual truancy does that include all of them, or that's just people that are chronically absent, not the people that were?
Just that 10%. Now, often those folks fall into the excessive and habitual.
They do.
So it would,
We're re-
so it would be so people that were in the,
Yes.
that includes
Yes.
the other, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because chronically is actually the least amount, so that's 10%,
Yeah.
about 100, or I'm sorry, about 18 days,
So
17,
the at
18
least
days.
chronically, okay, that helps my brain, thanks.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing because chronic absenteeism is
Yeah.
over here, and then the House Bill 410 stuff is over here, and they're just different definitions.
Yeah.
And I asked that question, when we went through the report card. Do they determine this based off of the state minimum amount of hours, or is it based off of a district's amount of hours?
That's a good question.
My understanding is the district's
Okay.
amount of hours,
Thank you.
but we can confirm that, make sure I'm not giving you bad information.
Yeah, because it's calculated based on the hours that they should be in attendance at our
At
school.
our school,
Okay.
yeah. So that even differs for elementary versus high school students. You will see in your packet that individual building rates of chronic absenteeism are outlined. We won't go into that tonight, but we just wanted you to have that information and highlight that's something that we did work on at DLT, was having the buildings kind of dive into their own data and then kind of look at what are some root causes for absenteeism. They had a discussion surrounding that at DLT, and then looking at some tiered evidence-based interventions to kind of tackle attendance. So we wanted to include those just so you could see what, we're kind of working on at DLT.
Those next two handouts in your folder show that, what we spent quite a bit of time on at DLT, really thinking about the root causes and then, them establishing the interventions that they want to put in place.
Right. We'll shift a little bit to talk about Panorama student surveys. As you are aware, this is the second year that we've been using Panorama, and our students answered the same questions that they answered last year, 31 questions if they were 3 through 5, 34 questions 6 through 12, and they were focused on these 5 domains that very closely align to our Ohio SEL standards. You may remember or may not, the students answered the questions on a 5-point Likert scale. So a 4 or 5 is considered responding favorably, reporting they feel favorable about that topic. And so that ties into the results. If we look at the second column, the first column is the domains, and a little description. The second column is a percentage, and again, that's the number of students that rated themselves favorably. So if we look at challenging feelings, 47% of our 3rd through 5th graders rated themselves favorably on that topic, and that put us in the 30th percentile. So one of the things that we really like about Panorama, it is normed nationally, so it helps give us a perspective of where our students fall compared to other students in the country. Under the 47%, you see a little arrow with a 2. That helps us understand how our students rated themselves compared to when they took it in the spring. So one of the things that I have really liked this year is we now have some nice longitudinal data. I felt, I think, almost protective of the data last year because it was a snapshot in time. We all know our emotional wellness is kind of up and down even as adults. So for our students, I didn't want us to be too reactive to the data. I really wanted to make sure that we had some nice longitudinal data before we started kind of making any big changes or shifts. So now we have our third round of information. And what we found really was that there weren't huge shifts if you look at the district as a whole, but individual buildings did have some gains and losses. So each individual building is in your packet, but we wanted just, for the sake of time tonight, just to give you an overview of district level data. So I'll just quickly go through our 3 through 5 so you can see where our students kind of rated themselves. We said for challenging feelings, they were in the 30th percentile. Emotion regulation, they fell in the 40th percentile. Positive feelings were in the 60th percentile. Self-management, 70th percentile. And social awareness, 70th percentile.
Just real quick on that, because I ran through it real quick.
Yep.
Just a couple of things that are seem particularly troubling. When you look at price, they dropped 10 points on positive feelings. That's the biggest drop in 3.5. And then when you get to Richardson and Lincoln, Lincoln has one that was no change, but everything else in those two buildings was negative. So that's pretty alarming data, because we're coming out of COVID. You know, we're supposedly everything's supposed to be getting better, and yet in these two buildings in particular, and then that area at Price, we're seeing major decreases.
So we're gonna talk in just a minute.
Okay.
Dr. Cruz is gonna talk about how
No, keep going, please.
how we're using DLT and BLTs are analyzing that building level data to tackle some of those things you just mentioned.
Can you remind us when these were taken? When this data was taken was October. Okay. And I know we don't have a lot of data to go on because spring was the first one. Is there, or, I'm sorry, December, last year. Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah. Is there any thought into these results? You know, when we have our data academically, we experience and we see like a summer slide almost. Do you feel that that plays into this at all, like having the data when the kids come back after being gone at all?
Yeah, so best practice is to wait 6 to 8 weeks after students return to school for that very reason you just mentioned. So we did make sure that we waited till later in that, I guess it was beginning of second 9 weeks, I believe, is when we administered it, to make sure that we were actually measuring where students were at versus that summer slide that you mentioned.
So the results, the difference between last year and this year, but they're different kids taking it because the fifth graders from last year obviously aren't taking this portion, and the new third graders were second graders, so it's like 30% different kids, right?
Yes, for this. Yep.
So, and I'm thinking, in my head I'm thinking a lot of the kids, the new kids were like in kindergarten when we started this pandemic. So, big changes.
Yeah.
I would expect big changes, but sorry.
Yeah, and so you can look at you can get real in the weeds of this. It's an awesome platform, but I don't want to steal Dr. Cruz's piece, but we shared this with our school counselors and school social workers, and they dove into the data, and they could look at grade bands and cohorts for high school folks, and really diving into which areas are certain grades struggling in, and then how can they intervene through classroom lessons or small groups. So all of those things you guys are mentioning are on our radar, and our counselors in particular are trying to tackle.
Schaefer, when you talked about that, and Ms. Merkel alluded to that, is really like tracking that cohort of students, and we're able to do that, not just like that's a summary of the 3 through 5 or the 6 through 12, but we can look at, and we only have 1 year right now, but we can follow them and be able to see how they're doing as a grade level based on that data.
I think fifth graders would have had more of a normalcy baseline, and then kids that were in the pandemic in kindergarten or first grade, it's been disrupted, and then now they're the new people taking that.
I think that's something
Interesting.
we'll probably ask for in the future too,
Yeah, that's
because I think we will want to see the cohorts as well.
Absolutely.
Because I think that it'll help us identify, is it these third graders coming in that's changing it, or is it or is it actually everything's going downhill as it seems, or is it this new cohort has a challenge? I think that would be helpful information for us as well.
Just power of both those
Yeah.
aspects of it.
Yeah, both
Great.
both sides. Great point, Ms. Schaefer. I have a general question about Panorama. Do we track our opt-out percentages as a district? I know this is like a hot topic, and when we were at Capitol Conference, you know, some districts have like upwards of 20% opt-outs.
We had 8
total?
8 total.
Okay, that's good.
That
That's
is
good.
good. Yeah. That's good.
But I think
That's great.
it's still important that parents know that they have the option.
Absolutely.
If that's something that's important to them as well.
Yep.
But thank you.
I have, just to kind of elaborate on that, every time we send out the opt-out
Yeah.
message, I do have parents reach out who wanna preview it, and, once they preview it, for the most part,
Okay.
they're okay with the content.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right, we'll just quickly go through our 612. We didn't do this already. Okay. For challenging feelings, 45% of our students rated themselves favorably, which put us in the 20th percentile nationally. Emotion regulation, 43% rated themselves favorably. That put us in the 40th percentile. Positive feelings, 55% rated favorably, 50th percentile. Self-management, 70% rated themselves favorably, which puts us in the 40th percentile. And for social awareness, 59% rated themselves favorably, which puts us in the 20th percentile as well. So again, the building breakdowns are in your folder.
I just have to point out, because I'm a Bullock kid, and Bullock gets a bad rap, but on
Look
this,
at those
when you look
results.
at these results on paper, the kids at Bullock are feeling relatively good. They're doing a little bit better in terms of these areas, so I just found that interesting, because Bullock still has a bad rap in our community for whatever reason that may be, but as a proud Bullock kid, it's nice to see that. But then, nonetheless, very alarming to see some of these numbers where, at Roberts in the high school, they're in the bottom quintile and even still going down further. That's alarm bells ring, I think, for all of us.
The last piece we'll show on Panorama, and this is hard to see on the screen, so it is also blown up in your folder, is just a heat map looking at all the buildings on all the domains. Similar to last year, we think of our buildings often as very different, but I think our kids are telling us they're more similar than different when you look at the results. Any other questions about Panorama before we move on? Alright. We're going to talk about student support referrals. You may or may not remember in the spring we talked about transitioning to a program called CAST. That is a platform created by SEI during the pandemic to help districts kind of track and coordinate care for students who are in need of more support. And so it was actually not developed for us, but other districts, and they enjoyed using it so much that we said, hey, can we use this too? And they said, absolutely. So CAST allows any staff member to make a referral for a student they're concerned about. The referral goes to the school counselor, who kind of determines the next best steps. So it may be a student they feel like fits nicely into their lunch bunch, so they might assign this referral to themselves. Or maybe the family needs help with linkage to community resources, so they assign it to the social worker. Or maybe they need mental health treatment and they assign it to Red Oak referral. So really it's just a way for everyone to stay in communication and to make sure that referrals don't get lost in the inbox or on the post-it note on the desk somewhere. That's not to say that those things still don't happen. It's certainly not perfect. But in year 2, I think we're finding more and more folks are using it, and our people are really liking it and using it to communicate. For example, like our Red Oak and social workers share the same space, so they're never in the same building together. And so this platform allows them to communicate and see where referrals are, since they don't frequently get to see each other. So I won't walk you through all of the data, but you can certainly see social, emotional, and mental health were the highest reasons for referral. I did note at the bottom, more than one reason could be selected, so they're a little inflated. Someone could also have mental health and attendance issues and both be checked. But during the first semester, 491 students were referred through this program.
And is this K-12?
K-12. Yep, all of our buildings are using it.
Well, I think, just in particular, I know you're going to talk more about suicide prevention programs in a little bit, but when you look at the number of 39, that's alarming, of course, but at the same time, we know that we're still missing kids, because statistically, that's not all of our kids that are having suicidal ideation. So I hope that there are ways that we can do more to try to identify that and encourage people to speak out, because you look, 39 is alarming when you look at it next to the word suicide, but even still, it's not, we're missing kids, and we don't wanna miss the wrong kid.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. All right. So we wanted to make sure that we talked about how we're using this data, because we all can get excited about looking into the data, into the weeds of it, but what are we doing to actually address some of these issues that we see come out of the information? So during last school year, we used DLT, BLT, and our whole child team to kind of look at some of this information, and it resulted in several things for this current school year. The first is we hired an additional elementary school counselor. We really recognized through the data we had to continue to focus on Tier 1, and our counselors are that front line for Tier 1 social emotional support. Our K-8 counseling team is also piloting some evidence-based SEL curriculum. They were doing great work, but everyone was using different resources, and so they recognized the need to have like a common language, a common resource, so that they were all speaking the same language, and when students move from elementary to middle school, they all have the same common skills that then the school counselors can build on in middle school. So we've tried one out in the fall semester. We're going to try a couple out in the spring semester, and hope to have a decision later this spring for what they'd like to use. And then the last two are actually programs that came out of the data analysis last year: Ruling Our Experiences, or ROCKS, and Sources of Strength. I'm not going to dive into those right now because we're going to talk about them at the end of the presentation.
When you're talking about the things that they're piloting, is that the social emotional curriculum that you're talking about? Okay.
Character Strong,
Thank you.
yeah,
I
second
just
step.
made the connection for me.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we kicked that off in the spring of last year, just having those conversations with the counselors, and narrowing down, which ones we wanted to look at and pilot, and then the actual piloting is happening this year.
And then this year, we're continuing with the DLT, BLTs, and whole child team to look at the data, and then we've also made sure that our school counseling and school social work team are part of it. They're in the trenches doing the work, so it's important that they're given time to look at the data and have a voice in how we respond. So we're really, this year, looking at a tiered use of the data. Dr. Cruz is going to talk about DLT and BLT in a moment, this first bullet point about how we use the data to identify building level action. We're going to continue to try to increase staff exposure to Panorama. There's just a lot of resources that come along with the platform, from student check-ins to the Panorama playbook. So we're hoping to kind of continue to expose our staff to that. I mentioned earlier kind of feeling protective of student level data in Panorama, but now that we have that longitudinal data, we're really using it to help drive student level interventions. So our counselors are using it to help identify students that might benefit from a group. Our social workers, again, are using it when they're trying to help problem solve certain cases and situations in buildings. And then long term, we're looking to help our teachers use this data in their classroom. So, and then the next piece is just kind of monitoring the effectiveness. We do this a lot with academics, right? We use progress monitoring all the time for academics, but we didn't really have a way to track if our social emotional interventions were effective. So we're hoping that this Panorama data will be a piece to help us kind of monitor and make sure what we're doing is working. And then finally, through this data analysis and the support of the board and Dr. Selico, we're looking to add another school social worker this year. So we really appreciate your responsiveness and willingness to help out with that.
When did the BLTs utilize the data and start doing that, building level action steps?
So, great segue.
Okay.
Thank you. So we set up our DLTs a little bit differently this year, where we invited all of the BLT members to come to the DLT table, tables, they're in here. And so at our last meeting, we gave them their Panorama data that you have access to, and they logged into the platform, so they dove a little bit deeper. And at the DLT meeting, the building level team sat together and analyzed this data. So they dug into it, they had some of the reactions, those notices, those wonders, and then they had to make their action steps of what they wanted to do back at the building with the data. So that's how we restructured that DLT a little bit. Ms. White was a part of one of our building groups, so she got to dive into the data a little bit and help them. They looked at some of the interventions that are in there. They looked at some of the playbook pieces and Panorama, and they talked about how they want to take it back to the staff and what those next steps are to bring the data to everybody and bring those interventions to everybody. So the bullets that you see here, this ongoing district support, so these were the pieces that this came right from the feedback from the building level teams at our last DLT meeting. So this is what they want us to, we asked a question about what can we continue to do or what can we do to help with this work. And these are those responses. Continue to support the work we do, keep on this topic to allow us time to see the culture change, continue to allow and make time to analyze the data and determine interventions, continue in the future to do just what you did today, empower us to help our staff in all of these areas. Sharing the slides was helpful, giving us this time to communicate is also nice. Sharing the slides and documents with us so we can share a consistent message with our staff members. So that was what happened, and it was, I thought, pretty powerful for them to have that time, and their reflections supported that, to be able to have that time to take the data and then consider what they can do with it. We know that it's important for us to have the data and for us to have district level supports in place, but we need our teachers and the folks at the building to really be on board with supporting the whole child work. So they dug into the Panorama data, they dug into the absenteeism data, just like what we talked through here, some of the questions around the difference between chronic absenteeism and those, the excessive absences. We talked about what that meant, and that gave them some conversations that they could have when a child has missed a certain number of days. I know it's hard, but missing more than 2 days a month is really what the state says is going to impact the academics. So we're all trying to have that consistent language, that it's not just us holding on to the data, and we want that to be disseminated and shared with everybody, because they're the ones who are going to do something with it at the building with the kids. Okay. So we told you that they were making action steps, so we wanted to give you the examples, even though Ms. White could also share some from her building. But these were very specific action steps that they wrote. So on the left side here, there are 3 examples that they wrote about what they want to do about the attendance piece. So taking it back to that staff meeting, that root cause document that we gave you a copy of, that was really powerful for us to have some conversations around it. It was so simple, but really starting to think about why don't kids come to school? Obviously, more the middle school, high school, it starts to become more about the child than the family situation. So it was interesting for them to start connecting with that root cause, instead of just like, I don't know why they don't come. They're not here, I can't teach them. Well, let's try to dig into it a little bit more. So looking at that attendance, those examples, they appreciated that document, and then that attendance interventions, thinking about it in the same way that we think about academic interventions, we can think about interventions to help with attendance. Another building wanted to create an absence intervention team, share those root causes, and then another building talked about citing their top 3 attendance concerns in their class, and having individual conversations, so really getting down to that student level. So we appreciated the different approach that they had. And then for the Panorama data, the 3 examples that we wanted to share with you, looking at the data at an upcoming staff meeting, and then they're going to filter that down to their teacher-based teams, doing a dive into the data a little bit more, looking at suggestions for staff, how that can flow into their class meetings, individual sessions with students and counselor groups. And again, looking at their next staff meeting, explore the results, log on and access the data in the playbook, and then share that whole child possibilities document and ODE's whole child framework. So we wanted to give you these examples because each building has some ownership over this. And that's important. We don't need everyone to be exactly the same at each building because we want them to have that ownership. But what is the same is the expectation. The expectation that we're improving our attendance and the expectation that we're considering the social emotional learning of our students. And how they implement that at their building and having that ownership of it is really what's gonna drive that work even further.
And even though they diversify, they have a common language, I think, Holly, you know, and I think that's great, because if you don't know what you're talking about. So that's really important too.
Thank you.
Would you be able to compile these so that we can see them? We certainly don't want to review them or provide feedback, but I think that the information you provide us about absenteeism and challenging feelings is very alarming. So I think we want to see what the action is being done at the building level so that we can sleep a little better at night knowing all these things that are being done, you know.
So you want all 9?
Yeah, just
Not
as
just
that
the
informational
25.
piece. I
Okay.
certainly don't want people to think that we're gonna be going through them and, you know, calling up Bullock and saying, well, what about, certainly not.
Yeah, and I
Certainly
think
not
what you'll see
the
are
intention.
some similarities,
Yeah.
really. These were pulled, there's 3 that were articulated well, but the thread is, you know, the commonality of having that, taking it back to the staff and diving into that. I think you'll see that, but yeah, we'll share all.
And then what's the accountability piece for our BLTs from a district level? You know, we're requiring them obviously to create these building action steps. How are we gonna hold them accountable to their data? If their data doesn't improve, what supports is the district gonna step in with to say, okay, you gave it a good shot, didn't work, here's what else, you know, how do we bump them up to a tier 2 if they need it?
I think what, couple questions in there. One, we're revisiting this at an upcoming DLT, so they're gonna come back and share out. So there's that accountability there of just, you said you were doing this, and now we've told all of you, and we wanna hear how it went. We wanna hear that you actually did what you outlined in doing. And then the data, I think, will tell a story. And we know that will allow us to see some of the effectiveness or ineffectiveness of the action steps. But having that collective conversation at the district leadership team, when we can look and, you know, maybe one building's absenteeism rates dramatically improved, we can talk about what they did. And that becomes that learned experience together. And another building that maybe didn't have as much growth or progress, we can learn and share that. And going back to those interventions that we had, you know, did you do something that was on, you know, some of those example sheets? Maybe we need to revisit what was being done. Did I answer your question?
Well, and I think what's important too is, and I know you're gonna talk about this in a second, but, you know, when you look at that whole child framework, before you get to community partnerships, there's that big maroon piece in family. And we don't do enough with family in our district. And I think that there's something to be said for, our staff does a really good job of trying to make school a safe space for their students. And I could start listing teachers that I think do a great job. I won't, but I could, because we have so many staff members that really go the extra mile to make staff a place where students feel valued and welcomed and encouraged and all of those wonderful things. And I think we have a lot of work to do in helping our staff as a whole understand more of what life is like in our community, because a lot of our educational staff does not live in this community, and this community has changed a lot. The needs of this community has changed a lot, and it's not negative to say this, but I think there's a chasm in the understanding of what our community is and what life is like when those kids leave school. And I can say this, you know, separate from board work, I do some nonprofit work, and we work with families impacted by addiction, and there's a lot of poverty in that community. And I can tell you, without naming names, obviously, a lot of those families impacted by addiction in the household that have a lot of poverty and a lot of challenges are families that are here in the school district. And families don't usually shout that from the rooftops, but that's impacting those kids every day. So I think there's a lot of work that we need to do in tying that family piece in, because I think our staff is eager to understand more, because like I said, they want their students to feel valued and welcome, and if they can understand these pieces, parts of them, they can do even better. So it's nothing against our staff, it's only good things about them, but I do think there is a lack of understanding of our community that we can do more work on, and it's very doable work, I believe. So I just think that's a piece of this pie that might be missing.
Alright, this is my favorite part of the presentation, because you all know I just love working with kids. So, okay. In your folder, there is a document called Whole Child Possibilities. This was started by our Whole Child team. And you may remember last year we had started the Whole Child work with Dr. Lorson from Wright State University. That work has continued this year. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But our Whole Child team put together this Whole Child Possibilities just to kind of outline all the
What
different
does that
things.
look like? Because we're looking.
It's this one.
Please don't tell me you didn't get one.
You can share.
Wait, hold it up again, Mr. Harris. It says draft on it.
Yeah.
You know what? If we don't have it, there's a copier in here, so we can make copies.
I apologize.
No, it's not
That's it as well.
I've got it.
I didn't have one. You have
It's
one?
just a single sheet.
You need
that's
one,
it.
Mrs. Schaefer? You need one, Mrs. Coco?
I'm not seeing my fingers.
Okay.
I know, they're,
Miss
it's hard
Coco?
because there's so much.
We'll share ours.
No, we got one for
Got
you.
one?
There.
Okay.
Thank you.
We got one. We made it work. Look at that.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
sorry,
what we
I don't
do.
know how to have it.
That's what we do.
That's
Get back
all
in
right.
the classroom this
Well,
way.
that's what you do, right? You make it work. We
So
do.
this is a
I
fluid
swear I
document.
get
You see it
25 on the printer.
You see it has draft written across it, so it's not anything that's set in stone, but just to help give you a sense of the different things that we have going on in the district to support the whole child. So the first column is really all those spokes on the wheel that comprise that whole child framework. We're going to highlight just a few tonight, because obviously we can't go over everything on that list. But we'll start with our comprehensive school counseling program. Many of you may remember our school counselors worked on this for a couple years and finally kind of put together a final product spring of 2020. And I just wanted to kind of report out and share that this is a living document. I know there was concern that it would just sit on a shelf somewhere and it wouldn't really be applicable to their daily work, but we continue to meet quarterly to update it, and it really drives their tier 1, tier 2 interventions for our students. The second piece, our district social workers, as I alluded to earlier, they're busier than ever. We're only in year 2 of our social work department, but they continue to get lots of referrals for mental health and trauma. They're doing a lot of crisis support in the buildings, and certainly the nuts and bolts of social work, the linkage to community resources and families, etc. And then lastly, Red Oak Behavioral Health, again, just in year 2 of having them embedded in our buildings. They are busier than ever. We keep asking for more people, but we currently have 4 therapists in 9 of our buildings, and since July, they have seen 214 of our students. So quite a large number just in a short amount of time. So the thing that I wanted to kind of highlight on here, it kind of ties into where we started, was that whole child work is not separate. It is embedded in our buildings and what we do every day. And we've worked really hard to not have it be something that just comes out of central office, but really be interconnected and tiered, right? That MTSS, and making sure that we're meeting kids who need different levels of support. So, any questions about any of these whole child supports? Okay. We're just going to highlight two new programs. I alluded to them earlier in the presentation, but the first is Rolling Our Experiences called ROCKS. It is an evidence-based 20-week curriculum for young ladies. We use some of our AG safety grant money to get our secondary school counselors and school social worker trained to be facilitators. And so the groups are up and running at the middle schools. We're hoping that they'll be up and running at the high school during spring semester. But so far we've had extremely positive feedback from our students and parents who are participating in the programming. So this is actually a picture from Bolick of the young ladies participating. There's also a parent newsletter that I included in there just so you could see some of the things that are going home to our parents related to that.
And it's an Ohio-based program.
It is. Yeah.
Info thing from them, which is
Yep.
great.
And then the second, I just wanted to highlight sources of strength. This is, if you guys know me at all, I so believe in youth-led prevention. This is a youth-led prevention program that Ms. Bogdan just jumped on the opportunity to be able to implement at the high school. So we partner with Greenleaf, and it is funded through the Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation. They believe so strongly in this program and its effectiveness that they're fully funding it to be deployed in schools throughout the state. So we sent about 12 adults. Dr. Cruz and I participated in the adult training, and then we had about 45 students participate this fall and get trained to be part of this organization. So it is, like I said, youth-led. They develop what they call campaigns to educate and engage their peers. It is a suicide prevention program, but they very rarely talk about suicide. It's all about building resiliency and strength. You may see those wheels. I saw a couple of them on my way over here. And all the spokes of the wheel are like different areas of strength. So, did you get a thank you card?
No, I have examples.
Okay.
From when I was in of the different like campaigns that they do, like the
I-
thankfulness journal. I just think this is really cool. I think we should talk about it more
Yeah,
when you
that
have
is-
time.
Okay.
It's worth more than a half
So
slide.
the reason I asked was because this picture up here is their first campaign, which was right before break, and they had a table set up, and the kids filled out thank you cards, and they wrote it to someone in their life that brings them strength. So it was an opportunity for peers to engage with each other, and then they were also able to start educating students about the program and whatnot. So it was a huge success. We were glad to see that up and running. So.
I just want to make the connection too that this is for our 9 through 12. So when we talked about the SEL curriculum, that was for that we're piloting this year. That's the K to 8, and this is that complement. And Mrs. Merkel can talk at length about the why this youth-led piece is so critical for our high school kids. That's where the evidence is shown that they're not as responsive to an adult telling them about character and self-esteem, and it's their peer group. And I think, those of us that have, middle school or high schoolers can certainly understand that it's the peer group that knows what they're talking about. So having these trained high school students and being a part of that training, it was so powerful. I still see some of the students that were in some of the groups, some of the teachers that were a part of that, and it was an incredible experience to have these kids become these sources of strength, and what they're doing with it, it's awesome. It's really.
I'm sorry if you mentioned this. How many students participated? Or
I want to say about 40, 45.
40? Wow.
In the
yeah.
training, it's do we like have a number of like how many students stopped by a table to fill out a card, or how many
I don't
cards were
think they
filled out?
We could probably. I know how many we purchased, so
Yeah.
that was also through the AG grant, so it wasn't coming out of the
Interesting.
general
That's
fund.
We would pay for it out of the general fund.
Look at Christie.
Christy's giving me side eye over there.
Well, remember, success and wellness funds are out of the general fund, though.
Yeah, this is true. So I do not have that number. I can ask if they were gathering it. That's a great question.
I think that's a good social media post too, Miss Stewart's
Yeah,
not
it
here tonight.
is.
But I think that's a great thing too, to talk about things that we're doing, because I think it is very important to talk about this work, to communicate this work to our community. and then, you know, throwing a big number, you know, this many thank you cards were written. I think that
Yeah.
tells a compelling story. I think it's important for our community to know about this work and what we're doing to make sure that our students are safe and valued and protected.
Yeah. Just one other point I want to make about sources that came to mind as we were talking. One of the real goals of the program is to shift the stigma around help-seeking behaviors. And so the students, were really trained in helping normalize seeking help when they're struggling. We all struggle. And so that's part of their goal as they go out and are youth leaders, is to help normalize and shift that narrative about seeking help. So that I thought of that as you were asking about the suicide and how do we reach those kids. We hope this is a piece of that puzzle.
So when we were at Capitol Conference, I stopped by and talked to the Sources of Strength people too. They were telling me about like the different campaigns. So they did the thank you card. They also do like the thankfulness campaign to think about that. I had extras of these. I made my nephews do it with me, and they got really excited. My one nephew like refused to throw it away. Like he had it in his room for weeks, and he's in first grade because he was like so excited because he was like, those are the 3 things I love the most. And so just to think of how impactful this can be for people, and you know, and they do the thankfulness journal. And then what I really liked about it, well, and secondly, they do have K-12 resources as well, and they have good stuff on emotional regulation, which I do see that our elementary school kids are struggling with. They had some really cool stuff on that because I looked it up. But I think the fact that it's upstream, do you want to talk about that? Because I think that's really valuable.
Yes, please.
The upstream.
Thank you.
Did you plant that question?
I did not
I
plant
have
that
my little
question,
thing
but
here, my
thank
little
you.
info thing. I'm really excited. I think this is
Yeah.
really impactful work that we should really spend a little bit of time on.
So I'm not going to try to say the quote because I tried to say it with Dr. Selico and it didn't go quite well. So, Ms. Merkel, if you could explain the upstream, downstream.
Well, it's really this idea of, I'm not going to tell the whole story. It's the story about how people kept falling into the river, and so they finally had to, instead of just going down to the bottom of the river and pulling them out, they had to move upstream and figure out why they were falling in the first place. And so we learned that at our whole child training last year, and we just continually come back to that and the importance of having those reactive supports, because we need them, but balancing that with really the need to move upstream and how can we help prevent some of these problems so that we don't have so many kids in tier 3. If you look at our panorama scores, it's a tier 1 issue. To support those kids, we can't have them all in tier 3 social emotional support. So we really need to move upstream and start with some of that prevention work.
And it just teaches people to practice gratitude, which is a
Yeah, I think
foundational
that's
emotional regulation, therapy skill, which is, it's really important for kids to know at all ages and all levels. You know, there's no secret to that. It's that we know, and it's research that, you know, being grateful and whatever that is that you're grateful for promotes positive feelings within ourselves. So I think it's a wonderful thing. And they gave me a couple of these that I'm going to give to you for your student. Gave me a couple extra wristbands, and they actually gave me a Sources of Strength t-shirt that you can give to one of your student leaders as well.
Seen that one.
Fancy.
So you can take
Thank
those
you.
to your student leaders after the break.
Great, thank you. Anything else about sources or? Okay. I promise we're almost done. We wanted to highlight, I think this was a comment was made earlier tonight, but there's no way as a district we can tackle all of these spokes in the wheel by ourselves. We really have to bring in our communities and families if we're serious about supporting the whole child. So it's impossible to list all of our partners. We just selected the ones that we were working with most frequently. So this is just a few of them, but you can see they're helping with things, not only mental health and social emotional learning, but they're helping with things like food. And the library, we've just developed a great partnership with the library. I mean, just so many different components of this whole child work can be supported with community partners. So, anything further you want to say about that?
I think that's great. The triple P
Yes.
something.
Yep. I did want to highlight, because Dr. Selico's learning the social worker in me, I just always have to give resources. I think I drive her crazy, but I wanted you all to have the resources as well. We're offering Triple P, Positive Parenting Program, this spring. So there's a little flyer in your folder just to give some of the details. It's a 5-session parenting course. It's going to be at Preston. It's 2 hours, and we're going to provide childcare and snacks for the kids to make sure that isn't a barrier to families coming. But Child Guidance, is the one that's going to come in and provide that service. So
When you talk about the spokes on the wheel and our partners, would there be a way down the line of taking our partners and tying them to the spoke in the wheel that they respond to? Because I think that would be a good visualization of how we are trying to meet the needs of the whole child.
absolutely.
Does it make sense? Christine Stewart's not here, so I'll volunteer her once again, because her graphic design work is very good as well. You miss a board meeting, you miss a lot.
I know, and I even said, after you take the pictures, you can go this evening. Now she's gonna blame it on me. Like I set her up.
She's pretty good at
She
these
is. She is very
visual
good.
She is.
arts, but
She's
yeah.
outstanding.
But I think that would be like a great way to like visualize how we're trying to meet these needs too as well. And for people that maybe don't understand it, I think even like when we do like new staff orientation, that would be a great thing to give to them, because we want to make sure any staff member that's coming in every year understands the resources that we have for families. I think that that's really an important thing that we need to include in that, and it'd be a great way of them knowing
Right.
what those resources are and having them on hand.
Yep. Absolutely.
I'll find one more thing three's a good number. We'll find one more thing to give to Christine before the end of the meeting.
She looks kind of bored lately. Yeah.
Oh, she's just going in to have surgery.
Yeah, she is. Don't overload her.
All right, this is the last slide with content, I promise. So just looking ahead to 2023, we wanted to share 3 things that we've been working on. The first is the Black Tigers Beyond the Classroom. You've heard me mention our Whole Child team a couple times. This is something that kind of born out of that team. As we looked at our data and just had conversations, we felt our kids were just not as engaged as they used to be in extracurricular, co-curricular. So we wanted to try to tackle that. So what we've been doing is putting together kind of an inventory of activities available K through 12, and then also putting together some information for our students and parents about the benefits of participating in activities. So we have a website that we developed. We're hoping to launch that in January, and then just a couple other ideas that we're throwing around about how to reach families, and kind of, again, that twofold of here's what we have available, and this is why it's so important and will help your child to participate in activities. So if you see this logo around town, that's us. We are counselors and social workers and psychologists, so we're not graphic designers. It was the best we could do. But those are the areas that we're kind of targeting for activities.
And Holly, would it be possible maybe to get some of that, of how many kids are getting into those activities, extracurricular and so on?
I think KJ's
Do we
office
know
might track
when-
that.
When we could maybe have the data for that, just to see?
Yeah, we'll have to get creative about that, because
That's fine.
especially K-5, a lot of what we're putting
yeah.
together is our community-based
Yes,
resources.
yes.
But yeah, we'll have to put our brains together and work with KJ and
Yeah,
see if we can.
exactly.
I've noticed the, out there, and I think over by the auditorium, there's like a list of
Yep.
activities that you're interested in this, you should try this.
Yeah.
But that would be something good to put on, the page.
Yes.
So you could click
Yeah,
on it, and
it
it would
would.
take you to the program. Like,
Yeah, so we're actually,
so parents could see, like,
Right.
you know, my kid likes music, click. Oh, here's all of the music things we have.
that's exactly what we're doing.
Oh, good,
Perfect.
that's
And
perfect.
we thought those
yes.
were so visually appealing that we asked the person that made that to do it for the whole district.
Yeah, it
So
was
she's-
very clean
Yeah.
and very easy to read.
Yep.
That's
So
Yeah,
really
it's all
good.
in the
nice.
works.
I've been trying to
That's good.
put those 5 letters together. And you could say all of, being engaged makes you calm. CAALM.
Where are you getting the letters?
Clubs, arts, athletics, leadership, and music.
Okay.
Oh, in the
Yeah.
Converse logo thing.
Listen, I went through a lot of variations of those 5 letters, and I know that Dr. Cruz is tickled by that.
Thank you.
Is it
That brings me
calm?
joy. Where's my
Calm,
gratitude
calm,
journal? I
calm.
gotta write that in my gratitude journal.
Calm.
It's 2 A's, right?
Calm.
It's just
C-A-A.
it's an Ohio drawl on that.
It's
Calm.
calm.
How about a calm? Coma.
All right, the next thing we're really excited about is eye care mentoring. For anyone that was at Business Alliance, you heard them talk about their program. They've been around 8 years in different districts, but they are a school-based mentoring program where they match one of our students with a community volunteer. And it's a 1 hour a week or a class period a week. They've had really positive outcomes. SEI manages their data analysis, and they've had some really positive outcomes. So we're excited to bring them on board, hopefully. I think the board's going to take a look at the contract tonight. But if all goes well, we hope to have that up and running in our middle schools second semester.
And is that's paid through the ADM board?
Correct. Yep. Indeed. And last, I just wanted to mention SAVES Act is still on our radar. We have a subcommittee of our Safety and Wellness Committee that's really working to make sure that we have our threat assessment teams, our suicide and prevention programming, and social inclusion programming up and running. So a lot of work going on behind the scenes to make sure that we're in compliance, and not only in compliance, but making sure we're doing the right things for kids. So.
I have a question for you. In a dream world where, time is no question, money's no question, what's something that your department isn't doing that you wish it could be doing? In a dream, it's not like I'm going to hold you to it because it's dream world, but I just wonder if there's like something that you wish
How are you defining my department? Like, what's
your department,
social
success and
workers?
wellness.
Do counselors fall into that?
Sure.
I would have a counselor and social worker in every building.
Yeah, that's fine.
It's, I think, incredibly hard to split buildings. They do a phenomenal job, but there's something to be said about the consistency of having those trusted adults in the building every single day. And I think counselors and social workers bring different talents, so that's why I say both in every building. If money were no option.
I wish there wasn't.
Yeah.
No. I know. You know I know. I'm on the cheap side.
I gotta make sure everybody hears that.
I lost my other question, so give
I
me a
had one too,
second.
and I can't remember. But
Do we, I know that we're getting this eye care through the ADM board. Do we connect a lot through the ADM board for resources? Because of one of the presentations that we attend, Ms. Schaefer and I were able to attend, the Holly Merkel of a different district talked about how, where they're from, that's one of the big funding sources for them. It's perhaps different here.
Yeah, so they fund a lot of things behind the scenes.
Okay.
So we talked about sources of strength as an upstream prevention. They also fund signs of suicide, thank you, which is downstream prevention, but it's still funded by ADM for that suicide prevention piece of things. So they fund that. I didn't get into it because it's in the weeds, but they're funding something called SPERT, which allows our Red Oak therapists to come in and start seeing students before if they just need like a short-term 5-session intervention, or we're waiting for parents' insurance to go through, so they're able to provide those services free to the family, and ADM picks up the funding for that. So there's just behind-the-scenes things that are going on that they're paying for that people just aren't even aware of. In fact, there are 6th District Care Award winner, not for our district, but they're going to be the Community Award winner this year because of all the things they fund behind the scenes.
cool. I just wanted to say that I appreciate all the writing, like for the journaling. I think that's a wonderful idea to have kids write about their feelings and how maybe they can overcome or, work on challenges and just journaling, like that. I think that's wonderful. So, thank you for that.
Of course. And I just want to thank the board too, because you all and the previous board were ahead of the game. You had this position ready to go before the pandemic, and I just really appreciate you recognizing the importance of prioritizing student wellness. A lot of districts are creating these positions now, but you all saw this before the pandemic, and it really allowed us to put some of these things in place, so that we can support our students. So thank you.
Oh, I remember. So I keep calling, I can't remember the guy's name, he was great, but I call him Marysville Holly Merkel, cause he does what you do for Marysville. But he talked about layering different things, like, they have like 3 different things on suicide. You know, is that part of like the long-term plan? Like, we get things off going off the ground and going well, and then we bring other things, additional sports. Is that part of like long-range planning?
Are you talking about like tiered supports or?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Because I would see like sources of strength would be like a tier 1 support, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
And then there would be from there.
Yep.
Okay. And then the other question is in terms of like meeting the needs of our families, have we ever considered doing like a survey to our families about what are their needs that go unmet? You know, because I think we have a lot of people that come out and do a lot of really wonderful things that we want to encourage them to keep doing. But have we ever asked our families, like, what are the needs at home? Like, is it food that you're struggling with? Is it clothing that you're struggling, like, what is it, what are the needs, and how can we help coordinate those needs on a more global basis, as opposed to just, the emergent needs that sometimes we're dealing with, but kind of getting a more global sense of community needs of a whole for our families, and maybe using that data down the road.
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, Ms. Coco.
I was just gonna say, along with what he was saying, I think, we have the blaring in our face needs of a lot of our students, that we see that are economically challenged. I think especially coming out of the pandemic, there's another group of families that don't necessarily fit that category, but need assistance. And they're the ones that I think tend to get lost sometimes, and are sometimes maybe the ones that aren't necessarily going to seek out help either, because maybe it's not that they're not used to being in that situation, or maybe they don't qualify for certain things. So I think that's a big piece of the puzzle, especially here in Cuyahoga Falls, for our families, especially right now.
Because you have to make very little to qualify for anything.
We had some of those conversations that tie right with what you're saying, that we don't want to just target families that have an identification of economically disadvantaged, that we want to promote these supports for all families regardless of their situation. And I think, we've had some conversations with some of our local churches and community groups that have that same approach of, we just want to help. You don't have to tell us why you need the help, but we just want to help. And so I think it's been a little bit of a dialogue, but it's helpful to hear that again, to just keep it at the forefront of what we're doing to understand their needs, but then also meet their needs, not just if they ask. Right? Like being more proactive in that.
Well, just like on student fees, for instance, it's been policy for quite a long time now. It's been our policy quite a long time that the treasurer has the authority to make these determinations, that we don't just pick some random number and say, if a family makes this much, too bad, you have to pay it. It's, Ms. Stoikoi in her office can really talk with families, and then they get to make that determination. And I think that's really important as well, that because things happen, emergencies happen, people have a bad year, stuff happens, and I think having that in place, and she shared some stories with us over time about how impactful that's been for people, and I think sometimes, a family that you would never think needs something just had a really bad year and all of a sudden needs something, but there's a lot of pride in this community, in particular, where people just won't ask for help sometimes. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Do Do you have a suggestion about how we would get that information from families that you were talking about, just what their needs are? Is that a survey?
I think maybe we
I
could do a
think
survey,
yeah,
or maybe
I
have
think.
additional conversation, I don't know.
Mhm.
Maybe Dr. Salco could ask if anybody, if she knows, she has kind of a network of superintendents, she could ask if any of them had done it, and go from there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have some ideas.
But I think it would be interesting to see what they need, cause it's one of those things sometimes when you feel like you're meeting people's needs, but if you've never really asked people what you need, you're like,
Well, you hit the nail on the head, honestly. Like, they've heard me say this
Mhm.
before too. Why don't we just ask folks what they need? What's important to them? What do teachers need? You know.
Mhm.
So I think a survey is actually is the answer, just
Yeah.
done in a tactful way.
Mhm.
But I think that's the way to do it. Figuring out how to administer that might be a different,
Yeah.
to eliminate the barriers, in terms of language, especially
Yeah.
making sure it's translated, for example, and maybe more than one means, not just electronic. You know.
Panorama does have parent and family surveys, so I'm not exactly sure what the content looks like, but I think we can tailor them, so that might be something we can look at. And then all that data would be in one
yeah,
Mhm.
place.
it'd be interesting to see. I think it's worth looking at. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know we appreciate so deeply the work that you do.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, we do.
On to item E, Treasurer CFO's business consent agenda, Ms. Stoikoi.
Thank you. I recommend the Board of Education approve all items listed in the treasurer's consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Some donations in the minutes, so a couple donors choose, or one donor's choose, and then another one from Mr. Riggins to Richardson, so always appreciated, all that stuff adds up and definitely helps us, all the time, so, much appreciated.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Gomez?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Ms. Schaefer?
Aye.
Ms. White?
Aye.
Ms. Coco?
Aye.
Thank you. Item F, Treasurer CFO's business, Ms. Stoikoi.
I'd like to recommend the Board of Education approve the November 2022 investment schedule and monthly spending report.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, Ms. Stoikoi?
Yes, just real quick. If we look at interest first, start off strong here. We had another really good month in interest, so that's kind of continued. Throughout this fiscal year so far, we received over $100,000 in interest to each of, in totality. That includes our construction accounts and everything. But to the general fund alone this year, we have received about $285,000 in interest, which is probably the highest it's been since I've been here, for a whole year, let alone just for the first 5 months of the fiscal year. So that's trending in the right direction. And it also helps our construction accounts to have that every little bit there helps as well. So we're looking to continue. I am meeting, setting up a meeting with Huntington to kind of go over some different options to look at getting some more interest in that account, and what we can do there to kind of get back to where we were before. The next one, general fund monthly cash flow. Pretty typical. This is a lower month for revenue. We've received everything from the county for real estate. It's pretty much in line with the years prior. Expenditures are right in line. They're actually a little under the last couple years. Previously, so we still ended with a little over 23 million, which is 3 million better than last year, and about 8 million almost better than 2 years ago. So that's in a good spot going forward. And then the only other thing I wanted to bring to your attention is if we look at the all funds monthly cash flow. So this includes everything except the construction accounts. And you can see revenue looks the same, and then you look and November for expenditures is kind of all over the map. And I just wanted to point out that is, we make our principal and interest payment on the bonds in November. And so if you recall, the first few years, we had it tiered for a larger principal payment because we had not only a balance in our bond retirement fund because we had collected for a few years before we actually went through with the sale of the bonds. We also had some accrued interest. If you recall, you've seen those statements from Red Tree that we got when we did sell the bonds. And so we used that money to pay down the principal and kind of attack it early and then kind of level out the payments as we go forward. So this was another one of those big payments, which is why it seems like, we've spent 10 million, but more than half of that was just that principal and interest payment towards the bond. So nothing to be alarmed at there. So that's really all I have.
I have a question about food service. So we got information about Chef Bill about, the struggle and understanding with our families about how meals aren't free this year, and it seems that there's a lot of struggle around that. What is your department helping with that? Are we making personal phone calls to try to help families understand that?
So we actually met, was it earlier this week or last week? We met recently within the last week, and then I've even talked to Chef Bell a couple times since then. Him and Hope, his secretary, have been reaching out to some of our maybe families that are higher in the negative than others personally by phone call or email to ask them to kind of figure out what the situation is, if there's an issue, if they need to fill out free and reduced, if they just don't know how to get on pay schools. Sometimes it's as simple as that. So he's been doing that. We obviously, whenever we send our fee letters by email, and we do that once every couple weeks, just here you go. We also include the lunch balance on there so people know how much they have or if it's in the negative and they need to make a payment. So that's coming out fairly frequently, once every 2 weeks, if not every week, just as a reminder to those families that they still have some outstanding things to be paid. And obviously we catch some of those with athletics and the pay to participate, and get them where they need to be. Once we come back in the new year, we'll be looking at those seniors who will need to be paid up, and kind of addressing them both with the lunch balance and any other outstanding fees going forward.
And then I have one question about athletics. So I know that in our emergency levy plan and that passed, we had money for athletics. Are you holding that separately, or are we gonna transfer that over?
We're gonna hold it separately.
And
Yeah, because what he really wants with that was to get on a cycle to replace uniforms.
Okay.
Was what was gonna come out of the emergency levy, and so instead of going through all the transferring, we'll just have it. We'll just have those purchase orders come out of the general fund out of that emergency levy, so it shows in there, and we can actually see all of it.
Okay.
And what we've done in detail in the emergency levy instead of just a transfer.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Please call the roll.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Ms. Schaefer?
Aye.
Ms. White?
Aye.
I was getting ready.
Mr. Gomez?
Aye. I'm so excited. Your comments, Ms. Stoikoi?
I do not really have anything. I just want to wish everybody happy holidays and whatever it is that you celebrate, and hope nobody is affected by the weather that's supposedly coming in, and that everybody stays safe and has a happy new year, and enjoy some time off, hopefully. So.
Ms. Stoker, I don't think I said "I" during that whole thing. I don't know if Mr. Gomez said "I" for me, or if you didn't say
I
that.
think you did.
But I'm adding my "I."
Thank you. Item G, Superintendent CEO's Business Consent Agenda, Dr. Selico.
Thank you. I recommend that the board approve all the items as listed in the consent agenda,
So moved.
Second.
which is just one.
Any comments?
Oh, Yes, thank you. Well, the first I heard was Mike, what's his last name? Wyrick. Oh, God. He's such a good friend of mine because he's really just a little bit taller than me, but that's not really why. We just taught together. And he's going on his 8th, what they call a deferment, I think, overseas. Been called up again, and we wish him well and bless him. The 8 times they've called this man, and it's just something, and I just hope and pray he will be safe and come back home to his family. So, just a wonderful teacher and friend.
Absolutely.
I know, thank you.
And then we have 2 retirements that we'll be approving tonight. Tricia Mancini-Sabo at Price and Richard Parrish at Roberts. We thank them both for their many years of service to our district. Please call the roll.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Ms. Schaefer? Ms. White?
Aye.
Ms. Coco?
Aye.
Mr. Gomez?
Aye. Did it right that time. Item H, Superintendent CO's business. Dr. Selko, any comments?
Thank you. Just a few things. One, essentially what I've been doing the last couple of weeks, just a couple highlights. As our soups troops went around, we completed our 2 service learning projects, one of which was the babysitting, and I appreciate Mr. Gomez and Ms. Schaefer came and actually participated in some of our events, and I think had maybe more fun than some of the students did. But we had about 25 students show up, and several of our soups troops as well as National Honor Society students come, and so I think parents were really appreciative of the activity and took advantage of it, which was nice. So we provided babysitting for 3 hours while parents got to have, some of them just had date nights. They were happy to just do that. And so that went well. We also delivered all of our collected on one day and then delivered last week to Good Neighbors and Journey Church with Pastor Jay. The staff provided a number of perishable foods, non-perishable foods. And we delivered those. Yeah, that wouldn't be good if they were perishable. But we stuffed the bus and took that, and so the students, I appreciate their efforts, and I know they were busy, and it was cramming for midterm time, and so I had one student help me on the last day, but appreciative of their efforts. Also I know some of you also participated in read alouds at Roberts and Bullock, so I enjoyed that, and had fun with doing that, as well as being a guest speaker at one of the high school classes for Ms. Palmasino. And as a result, and I know I won't steal this again from you, Ms. Coco, at our business advisory though, we did reach out to folks. I put something out there to them asking about volunteering to speak in her class, and several business owners took advantage of that. So she's very excited. She thanked me. She thanked for the board's involvement as well, and so she's excited to have people come in and speak to the students. We also have had a number of concerts going on around town and around here, so that's been nice to see a number. I know it's a very busy time, so I appreciate our students, particularly our musicians and singers that have been going out into the community and providing enjoyment to our folks, so I appreciate that. And then just lastly, I would say about the presentation that we saw this evening, and Mr. Gomez, I appreciate your passion, and I know how important it is to all of you, the topic we heard this evening, as well as it is to me. And just, again, asking the board, as we reorganize a little bit, one of our priorities and one of our commitments, mine has always been to addressing the social emotional needs of our students. Because if we don't address that first, I don't think a whole lot happens after that. So, we can have the most dynamic lessons, we can provide the most excitement to our students, but if they're not there mentally, physically, then we're missing the boat. So we'll do some things. We have some ideas that I'll be presenting to you on ways that we can address some of the things that we heard this evening. And lastly, I would echo what Ms. Stoikoy said. I mean, not that I'm not excited to be here this evening. Would have preferred to have been with my family in Phoenix, but since I'm here, I'm so glad I was to see all of the presentation and to see all of you before the holidays.
And
so
for the record, we didn't make you be here. It was
No,
a family situation.
No,
It was not us.
they were going to let me go on vacation. It just didn't work out for the family. So, and happy holidays, whatever our families in which they celebrate. So, and I wish them all well and some good time off. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Item I, board business. Number 1, President Pro Tempore. The board is required to elect someone to preside as President Pro Tempore at the organizational meeting on January 11th, 2023. I'll open the floor to nominations for President Pro Tempore.
I will nominate Mr. Gomez.
Are there any other nominations? You can, so, I can't make a motion about, the motion you would make is to
Okay.
close nominations and direct the treasurer to cast unanimous ballot.
I make a motion to close nominations and direct the board to make a the treasurer to make a unanimous, wouldn't it be as-
Cast unanimous
cast a
ballot.
unanimous ballot.
That's a lot of language.
Oh, it
Yeah,
was.
that is
Okay.
mouthful.
That's the Roberts Rules of Order.
Yes, it
motion.
is.
Wow.
Second?
You need a second?
Second.
Oh, yeah.
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Ms. Schaefer?
Aye.
Ms. White?
Aye.
Look at me, now look what you guys have done. Ms. Coco?
Aye.
Mr. Gomez?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 2, policy approval, adoption, and rescission, because there's one rescission. It's recommended the Board of Education approve, adopt, and rescind the following policies, which were reviewed at the December 7th, 2022 Board of Education
So
meeting.
moved.
Second.
Mr. Harris seconded. I don't know if you. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Any comments? Okay, please call the roll.
Ms. White?
Aye.
Ms. Coco?
Aye.
Mr. Gomez?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Ms. Schaefer?
Thank you. Number 3, iCare agreement. It's recommended the Board of Education approves the agreement between iCare and the Cuyahoga Falls City School District.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
If I may, just one,
Yes.
just to piggyback on this, I presented as well as Ms. Merkel mentioned that we had the gentleman come and speak at the Business Advisory Council. I too met with the gentleman. This stemmed from just a need for our students to have some mentors and influential adults, more of them in their lives. And just so happened that I mentioned mentoring, and sure enough, Holly had a suggestion, and then we took it from there. Holly arranged for a meeting with us, and so I'm very pleased with the program. They were able to produce some outcomes that I was happy to see, and it will be funded, as you had mentioned, Mr. Gomez, through Adams AD, well, we called it Adams in Cuyahoga County, the board, and so it'll be free to us. And I envision that happening. I asked the sustainability question. I don't want to put people in our students' lives that won't be there long. So we do believe that the funding will continue. So I'm real appreciative of this opportunity. Thanks.
I have a couple questions that can be followed up on after the holidays, just in like how this will work once we approve it tonight. How are we gonna solicit the mentors, and then are they gonna have to pay for their background checks? Because it says that it's done through the same way that we do, and we make our staff pay for their background checks.
Yeah, we won't. We told them that they won't.
Okay.
We have to do that. We actually got some already signed up.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like how, cause like Barberton's like posting it, I've seen theirs shared on social media, that like they're posting asking for mentors.
They have a recruitment team. There's a gentleman there,
Okay.
well, I guess, I don't know, maybe a team of 1 or 2, but that they will look for mentors for us as well.
And then, how do we prioritize which kids get picked for mentors if we don't have enough mentors for kids?
And do you want to address that? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so we have a meeting scheduled January 13th with our middle school team, counselors, principals, and iCare staff to kind of work through all of those questions. So they have some suggestions about how we select kids, but ultimately we know our kids best.
Mhm.
So they'll help walk us through kind of their recommendation and how we can adapt that
Okay.
for what we feel like our needs are.
And then when are they going to, and I know that it's during the school day, when are we gonna do that? Because I think this is a great program, but on the same time, I don't, like, our academic scores are also somewhat challenging too, so I wanna make sure that we're not, making kids miss too much of their core academic time. It's like this challenging balancing act, cause our kids have,
It's actually
truly
during
have so
lunch.
many needs.
Lunch recess at the middle schools.
They made it clear that
Yeah.
Okay.
academic time is off
Okay.
for them, so like Bullock has that win time,
Okay.
lunches, and tiger time at Roberts, so, we're hoping that we can use those
Yeah.
kind of non-academic times.
only thing that I don't like about iCare is that they kick out kids with attendance issues, because I think those kids need mentors too, possibly even more. But it is what it is, and I think it's a great program. But I think that's prioritizing the adults' feeling of their hour being wasted if a kid's not there over what a kid truly needs. But so be it, and I'll still vote for it. But I do take issue with that, and I'll tell the people that if I need it.
Yeah,
If the student doesn't come, then it's hard to build a relationship with that student. And so then you often end up losing a mentor because
It could be the thing that motivates the kid to come though on the same end. So.
they said they're flexible with us.
Okay, good.
We feel like
they
the
are.
I
student
appreciate it.
struggling with attendance really needs a mentor. It's not like a
Good. That makes me happy. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. Please call the roll.
Ms. Coco?
Aye.
Mr. Gomez?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Ms. Schaefer?
Aye.
Ms. White?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is item 4, discussion item, meeting dates. I have Mr. Jones very helpfully did this. I'll pass these down.
Oh, is it different?
He printed out new ones.
Oh, okay.
It's in color. He printed
Yeah.
one for you, Christy, so you can take that up with him.
I know, that was under my direction.
So these are our proposed meeting dates.
Pretty.
So,
Christmas Eve.
we vote on them at the organizational meeting. This would be a good time to bring up if we have issues, if we wanna change things, discussion on that. And then, we would want to make a selection on the July dates as well. That is one decision we do need to make tonight. I don't know if anyone has anything planned, any vacations planned in July that we could accommodate one way or another if we chose one or the other.
Can I ask, does the construction planning have to stay on a Thursday?
I do think so, cause that's a commitment we made to the people when they were appointed to the committee. It's a promise we made to them.
I have no preference.
I don't have a preference, switching it, I have like one more swim meet that I'll miss in January by switching the dates, but it's not an important one for my daughter. Not that they're not all important, she's not listening, but if she were. My one suggestion would be with switching this is to make sure that we're communicating it, out to the buildings, because a lot of times they are, they try to work around when our board meetings are so that we can go to events. So just to make sure that they are aware that we're switching these. And even see a lot of them have things planned out all the way through the end of the year. So maybe just be sensitive to that and reach out and make sure that that's not gonna be an issue anywhere, but that's
Yeah,
just my thought.
I planned on notifying them. In fact, I've already been
So-
planting some seeds as people have been coming up with some dates. I'm like, well, you might wanna put that on hold, cause I think we may be switching our board meetings.
No preference in July?
No preference.
No preference.
We wanna do the 12th and the 13th?
Sure.
Perfect.
Okay. I mean, I'm a doer, I'll pick if nobody else wants to.
That's fine.
Okay. Well, and I thought having them back to back would be helpful, cause it's like,
Yeah,
we kinda take
Yeah.
the month off in
Yeah, if you wanna take a
essence.
vacation.
So that
Yep.
way,
yeah.
they're back to back and then
Didn't
the
think
rest
about
of the
that.
month is still
That's good.
Love it.
freed up. Okay, sounds good, and then we'll vote on that January 11th.
So, yeah.
Student member of the board, that's discussion item, it's number 5 under board business. So that was one of the reasons why I stopped by that, Soups Troop event, to kind of talk to some of them. They did have some interest in that. Dr. Selko did advise me, one of the challenges is these are the kids that are involved in everything. But the idea would be that we would only ask them to come to one meeting and give like a little bit of a report. That's what other districts do. Because having one person be your student member of the board and come to every meeting or one meeting a month, it's a lot to ask of a student. But she has a core group of about 5 kids, so if we had them come once, one kid comes in at a meeting in January, February, March, April, May, that would still give us 5 opportunities to hear from a student, get some feedback and perspective.
I like
Yep.
You wanna give it a try? Maybe second meetings of the month?
that when we do the top tigers too?
Yeah.
So that might be,
Would they just be attending the meeting, or would they be participating, or doing a presentation?
What they
or-
do in most districts is that they would like sit with us and they would give us a report like under the presentation section, like give us their feedback, and then I would say that the same general ideas of like public participation is that we wouldn't want them to, like, if they have complaints, you know, of, we want to hear if there are things that we can do better, but we don't want them to name any people in that or other students.
So their peers might be saying, hey, you're the person this month, this is what I would like for you to bring.
That's what happens in other
Okay.
districts. I've watched some of what Akron does, and because they have different buildings, obviously in Akron, so they'll share out from the different buildings. But what can we do better for our students, and just making sure that they realize that we do care what they have to say, and we'll see. We can.
Yeah.
It's a learning experience for all of us. We
Yeah.
haven't done it before,
No.
but something
Are-
we've talked about for a long time. It's
Are we
helping.
giving them any guidance on like different subjects to give feedback on, or just open it up to anything?
We can.
Or I just, like, I'm thinking as a teenager, I think it would be overwhelming if somebody said, just come to a board meeting and give me feedback on the district. Like, you know, maybe break it down into
Yeah, I
4 or
think there's
5 different
coaching
categories or
that can
something. I
happen.
don't know.
And I also, the more I was thinking about it, we had a connection to like our government class. So like the government teacher would prep the students, cause this is really a civic lesson, right?
Yeah.
So, we can look into, and then maybe I'll even ask Dr. Cruz if you could look into something with, cause I'm not sure who our government teachers are, but if we could make some kind of connection that maybe they can suggest a student, and, you know, prep the child. But I will say, like, soup troops, for example, even when I ask them to air out, you know, whatever it is, let me hear the good, bad, whatever, and they're all so professional, as even young adults. I mean, they really are, they refrain from, you know, they really are just factual and give me good information. We'll see what we can do for
Okay.
next time. Yep.
And they're gonna be appointed? Or
Yeah, let me work on that a
Or
little
they're
bit and
having an
see.
election, or
Or
run a
the
campaign?
the preliminary idea was to work with the Stroups kids
Yeah.
if they're interested. Now, some of them might not be interested. They might not want to. I mean, we're certainly not going to force them. That wasn't part of when they signed up to be it. But I thought that would be a good first place to go, because they're
I'll start
already
with them.
engaged kind of at the district level by meeting with Dr. Selico. They have a little bit more of an understanding than maybe just the average student of some of the district pieces.
Yeah, I'm gonna meet with them the first week we return, I think, in January, so I could see if I can get someone for that. meeting in
maybe,
January.
student council too.
Yeah, that's another good one.
Yeah,
It's
so-
another good avenue. Yep. Yep. On it.
So I think what we said is it's a road we wanna keep going down, and then we're gonna keep addressing the forks as we head up. Is that?
I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. Number 6, future agenda items. In January, we'll have our executive session to go over our formative evaluation with the superintendent, and then she wants to meet with us as well. She shared that information with us. There is a Supreme Court ruling about executive sessions, specifically related to school boards, so that now you can list anything that you might talk about, and then you don't even have to talk about all the things that you might talk about. You just list all the things you might talk about, and you go in. So it's made our processes easier going forward.
Cool.
So we'll use that for the first time in that January meeting. We'll list all those things that we think we might talk about, and we can just go in once. It's gonna be exciting. Less walking back and forth.
Yeah, that's nice.
So that's that, and I know she, Dr. Selico has that presentation coming on the action steps for the strategic plan.
So, if you had like 3 executive sessions about 3 different items, you could list all 3 items in one executive session, not have to back forth.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
Cause the Supreme Court came out with a new ruling on it, so. That was
Makes it
exciting.
easier.
Yeah, that's a
Yay.
Mhm.
Forever.
Yeah.
And then I wanted to toss this out there as a potential future agenda item for the first quarter of next year to see if there's interest from others or if it's just something I need to talk to Ms. Stoickley about on my own. In terms of like understanding, you know, we went out and we sold these bonds and then we make payments on the bonds and then we have the budget and then we get the interest. Is there an interest? Is there different type of interest? Is there interest from the
No,
board
I
as a
agree to
whole
that.
on trying to like get a better sense of understanding on all those financial pieces as we get to the point of like getting a final budget at the end of March?
You know I'm gonna say yes on that.
Or is that just a question that I have? Because I don't want it to be an agenda topic if it's just something that I'm wrestling with, because then I'll just meet with her. But if it's something we're all trying to understand
Right.
more.
I can always try to
Yeah, I was gonna say, I can
understand
always,
that.
yeah.
I think there's always room for.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
Absolutely.
there-
After
I mean,
the
I
holidays, I'll
wouldn't
talk
say
to
we're
Ms.
financials.
Stoickley
No,
because
I
I'm
wouldn't either.
because the fact is I don't understand it, so I probably didn't even explain it well.
I would never say no to a private tutoring session though.
But I think you get the general sense of like it's kind of
All of it.
all these
Yeah.
different
Different
pieces, and I
accounts
think
and
it would be
funds
helpful to
and-
kind of as we're gonna get to the point of like this is how much money this is gonna cost, and then have those conversations. It'd be helpful to kind of understand the numbers more, and you know, when we make a payment, what does that mean? Because we're making payments on the bond, but then we're paying TDA, and it gets confusing
does.
for me
It does.
of what's
I'd say right now, very simply, the bond itself is separate from all the other stuff. They do not connect, they do not do anything, they're in different funds. One is just over here to pay back the bonds, and that's where the money from the taxpayers goes into that fund and then goes out to pay those payments. So that's basically like the bond issue that we passed. That. All the other stuff is the money from the sale of those bonds and the state share and all of that will actually be used to pay for the construction itself. But the bond payments will go on for that 35 years or 36 years, whatever it is that we passed it for at the time. And that fund is literally just receiving money from taxpayers from the real estate settlements and then paying principal and interest twice a year.
not
Glad
there.
you asked.
No, I am glad I
Yeah.
asked because I don't understand
know,
it, but I didn't know if it was just a me thing.
Yeah, no.
No,
Yeah,
it's
I
not
think
just
maybe we
you.
could,
No,
yeah,
yeah.
because I think it would be helpful because we know that that's like, especially as we
Yeah.
hit that GMP, we're gonna get questions, and I think it'd be helpful to make sure we really understand that because we want to sound informed when we're talking to our community about it. So, okay.
And
Yeah,
when you
I
tell us
think
that, you
that's
can pretend like we're really dumb. And we don't know anything.
Well, we are.
Act
mean,
like I don't
am.
understand any of what you just
I won't
said.
say really. I mean, I know, I kind of,
Yes, I did know.
I know. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
that's a good idea.
Yep.
Okay.
I agree, thank you.
Item 7, committee reports. Before we get into them, just remind everyone that we'll assign new or the same committees at our organizational meeting. So if you want to change them, if you want to change what committees you're on, if you want to stay on the same committee, either way, just give it a little bit of thought. And with that, we'll go into them. 612 core team. I know you met. Is there anything additional?
No, there wasn't than
Okay.
what we already received in our packet.
Thank
So,
you. Alliance for School and Community Growth, Ms. Coco.
Yes, we met on December 13th. There were 34 in attendance, a couple new faces again. It's growing, and there's just a lot of energy and excitement in that group, which is great to see. iCare presented on the mentorship program, and their goal is 25 mentors to start with in the middle school, and then branch out from there. I was very impressed with everything they do and all the training that they do with the mentors and following. They're not just vetting someone through a background check and sitting them down with the students. They're going through all the different steps that need to happen before and during the process with the student to be able to build a long-term relationship. And I believe they have an 80% retention rate with their mentors. So they're looking for long-term commitments from these mentors for the students. So we had that presentation, and there was a lot of interest. I know that some have already reached out about becoming mentors. And then we continued the work in our 3 groups of what we can do now, what we can do in the future, and the group that is building a database for businesses and student partnerships for job opportunities and things like that. And Mr. Hutch is part of that group and is helping get that started and off the ground. Another main area of focus is right now is revamping and kind of giving a fresh look to the career night at the high school. So that's a big focus as well, with the community support and the businesses.
Thank you. Foundation Alumni Association, we met last week. The scholarship portal is now open on our website, so if you know any seniors, not just people going into 4-year programs, we have options for people going into 2-year programs as well. We have, I believe, 51 scholarships that we are looking to give out this year, so encourage people to look into that. We had a mixer with some new board members we're considering. We're going to invite them back to our board meeting in January and then see if they'd like to join, because there's more that we can do if we have more people. And then one of the new board members, Linda Skidmore, she talked about, she attended our reception this past May because one of her friends was one of the distinguished alumni, and her brother passed away almost 7 years ago, and he left her quite a nice chunk of money to do something with. And she had been waiting 7 years to figure out what she wanted to do with it. And she said, she left that night and said, I know what I'm going to do with that money. And she started a scholarship in her late brother's name to support students that are going into vocational programs, because her late brother was a carpenter. And so she waited 7 years to find the right thing to do. And just by coming to that, she just felt so moved by that. And she wanted to do that, and that's one of our goals as a foundation, is to support more students that are going into the vocational program. So just this wonderful marriage of these 2 things coming together, and very moving story from her. So just awesome stuff.
I'd love to be a carpenter or learn. Sorry.
That's great.
I know, I really, it's,
Legislative Liaison, Mr. Harris.
Yeah, I'll be brief. The 134th General Assembly wrapped last Thursday, I think, at like 6:30 in the morning. Yeah, bless them. Just real quick, I was talking about 2 bills, House Bill 151, which was the transgender kids playing sports, the ban on that, and then Senate Bill 178, which was in the House. They ended up combining those 2, putting Senate Bill 178, which was, again, the overhaul of the state's education offices. They put those 2 together. It failed. But President Huffman, Senate President, said, it could return in the 135th General Assembly. A couple other bills that didn't receive action were bills related to critical race theory, the third-rate reading guarantee, and then modifying requirements for veterans to be teachers. It looks like the 135th Assembly is scheduled to begin in the House on January 3rd, but there is no calendar yet set for the Senate. So, it was quite a bit. Did I miss anything? It's been a lot.
It actually wasn't that bad of a lame duck.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, it was, in terms of lame duck sessions, I was like feeling pretty good
Yeah,
about
okay.
it.
yeah.
They expected worse.
Yeah.
Right.
They
Oh, yeah.
anticipated it to be worse.
They fixed some of the school funding, the DPIA and the transportation pieces. I know those are things that OSBA was advocating for, so those were good ones as well. And then they did implement the requirement to teach about child sexual abuse education, so that'll be a new requirement that we have to meet. But they are encouraging you to use community resources, but then they passed a weird rider that said that you can't use a community resource that promotes abortion. So, but I have a plan. I'm gonna reach out. I think it's a great, so my personal opinion is, I think that's a great way for LGBTQ support groups like Equality Ohio and Kaleidoscope Youth Center to step up, because sexual abuse in the LGBTQ community is actually a real serious issue, and I think that would be a great way for them to get into more of our public schools.
Right.
Because every public school in the state is going to be looking for someone that's offering that education. So if they get on the front lines of meeting those needs, we're going to get them in these schools. And I happen to know people that
was
work in
gonna
those
say, yeah, you know a few
organizations,
folks. Yep.
so I'll be talking to them over the next couple of weeks about my little ideas,
Yeah.
because
Perfect.
you
Good.
can turn lemons into lemonade some way,
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah.
So. But yeah, I
That's
thought
always the way.
overall it was a pretty good session. The State Board of Education as well did pass the Title
Yes.
IX resolution, but they did take out some of the worst language in the 1st three
Sorry, I
paragraphs.
forgot to mention
No,
that.
you're good. And they're going to be sending all of us and our superintendent a letter with a copy of the resolution, which I think the waste of taxpayer money and mailing those letters out is really the most offensive part.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need a copy of your letter. I'm well aware I've read it.
Right.
So,
Oh, did you hear that Mr. Gomez was discouraging people?
I know.
Wow.
so the usage of stamps.
Oh,
Yeah.
stamps more so
It was
than
the
stamps.
stamps. It was the
Yeah,
stamps.
the paper's
It was
fine,
the
the
stamps.
stamps.
It was the stamps. Thank you. And DLT meets next in February. Comments, I'm up first. Our art club, National Art Honor Society, won one of 3 awards for their parking meter. Kermit Zilla. They won one of the awards yesterday. Mayor Walters awarded them with it. So
Great.
congratulations to them. It was at many of the same places you will all mention as well. The Preston Winter Family Night. They had a phenomenal turnout.
They did.
And it was just really wonderful to see the kids who are friends with each other talking to each other, and then the parents getting to meet one another. And that's Principal Brown said that was really her goal of that event. And just to see that happening was really so wonderful, and we know the impact of that, making those connections. So it was really, really a great event. And she had so many of her staff members volunteered to be there, and there was so much for the families to do. She had all the classrooms open, lights on. It was just really a welcoming environment. It was a great model, I think, for other buildings on what events can look like and how you can be really welcoming to our families. Lincoln's dance was great. My nephews had a great time. I had to stop by because I promised them I would. DeWitt's holiday event was phenomenal. I got to see Mr. G before he retired today. I also had a chance to stop by the Historical Society for their open house and see the big Laybourne sign that we allowed them to take. They're getting ready to mount it on the wall. So that'll be a piece of history that people can visit. And lastly, the babysitting that the Soup Troops did was truly one of my favorite events that I've gotten to attend as a school board member, because there's always just like, you go to these dances and these events, and they're phenomenal, but they're all doing things. And at this, I just got to talk to our students, and we don't get to do that often, and that was such a valuable experience. And they were playing freeze tag, and the one girl didn't want to play, so I sat on the bench, and she just started talking to me and telling me about school, and it was just really wonderful. So I will definitely come back if you do it again. It was one of my favorite things. Up next is Mr. Harris.
Well, I first just thank you to my colleagues for making it to as many events. I wasn't able to make too many of the winter events the last couple of weeks. It's just been busy with work, so thank you all for getting out there and doing that. Really, all I want to say is I hope everyone has a very safe, healthy holiday season. I want to thank the student staff and all of our administrators for all the amazing work they did this last semester, and let's go into 2023 strong.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes, this was a very busy time. If you have ever had kids in music, in any kind, so many
Yes.
concerts, so many band concerts, choir concerts. I was able to attend Vespers, which I haven't been to Vespers for like 15 years probably. It was really nice. It was beautiful. And they sang a song where they came into the aisles. And I went to, when they had the choir concert at the high school here, they also did the same thing, but I was sitting in a different spot, so I heard different voices singing. So it was like it was beautiful to hear the entirety of the choir sing together, but then to be able to pick out certain voices because they're right next to you. It was very moving. It was a very nice concert. And then I got to go to Bolik's band concert, and one of my favorite things at those concerts is the 6th grade band, because they just like pick up the instruments for the first time in like the end of August, and they're in the concert in December, which is not very many weeks of learning to play an instrument, and they did a really nice job. It was really fun. I enjoyed it. The Preston I attended with Mr. Gomez, and so many people there, as evidenced by I had to park on a side street like a block and a half away to get there. Yeah. But it was very well attended, and like you said, Mr. Gomez, seeing the children meet up with their friends, and then they had a couple like selfie stations set up where they were taking like selfies with their little group of friends. It was such a hoot. It was a good time. Good time. I think that's it.
Thank you. Ms. White?
Well, I also went to Preston, and I was impressed with how they played the drums. It was so
Yeah.
great. I would never have thought. The imagination some of our teachers have. They donated big, I don't even know what to call them, tubs from Lowe's or Menards or Home Depot or wherever. And she put little squares of rubber mat on top of them, and then the kids just pounded. It was so, imaginative, innovative. I was just like floored. And then, I don't know, but everywhere I go, I don't have many parents talk to me. I have the kids. They come up and talk to me all the time. It doesn't matter where they do. I don't know why. I probably do because I'm short. Yeah. I know, it always is. And then I was able to talk to I go to Robert's band concert. But the other thing I did was read aloud at Roberts, and that was so much fun. Oh my gosh, I got to read to a 6th grade class, and again, I kind of moved things so I could sit with them, in front of them, and I read, and and I just talked to them, and they were so cute, and this one little boy came up, "Can I have a hug?" Of course, I'm a hugger, you all know that, and I didn't even know the kid, but he, okay, sure. It was just a hoot. It was a lot of fun, and I hope they have us come back to do that again. I love that. And then I did attend the Bolick and Roberts bands just Monday night. I think it was really kind of not put out very well, because, a lot of people didn't know about it. But
Which one was that?
it was with the Akron Symphonic Winds, Bolick and Roberts, the 8th grade bands, with
Okay.
the Akron Symphonic Winds. And I just want to give them a huge shout out because they came in and helped the kids play. And boy, was it something. And then they played like the Nutcracker, just wonderful. It was really something to go to. So I'm glad I did get to go to that as well. And the kids were great. That's all.
Thank you. Our holiday gift from Ms. White was no article tonight.
I didn't bring one. I thought about it.
Didn't even think about I was waiting for it, Patty.
No, I didn't. I thought about it, but I was gonna bring like the story, a Christmas memory, but that would take.
Was the board meeting before Christmas?
There you go. I did that. I made a parody of that for the high school, and Dr. Holland read it over the loudspeaker. I could probably do that, but
We're ending earlier next December for the record.
oh, stop. Okay.
Ms. Coco?
Yes. I didn't get to attend a lot of the winter events due to health issues in the past couple weeks, but I did make it to be a guest reader over at Bolick during their literacy event, and I had a group of 7th graders, and they were so well behaved and attentive, and quite a few of them I knew because pre-COVID they were at Richardson, and I was the library person over there, so it was fun to get to see all of them, and I didn't think that, I'm like, oh, these 7th graders are going to think it's not cool to sit and listen to stories by an adult. And it was the exact opposite. They loved it. They loved coming in and sitting and just listening to stories being read. And then I was really impressed by the selection of free books that they were able, there was really something for everyone there that would spark their interest. And they were so very excited to get those books. And then I was able to, just yesterday, attend as a parent, Richardson did Holidays Around the World celebration. And each classroom, kindergarten through 5th grade, was assigned a different country, and they had spent time researching and getting facts and writing facts. There was the literacy component in there, and so each class had their doors decorated with a different country and their holidays and what they celebrate. And then the grades went around to each class and learned about that country and what their different traditions and celebrations were. And it was really cool. They got a passport that they stamped everywhere they went around the way. And so it was a very, very nice event. And I learned a lot of facts about a lot of places I didn't know. So it was very educational, and it was a great event that they had. And just end with, we're halfway through the school year, but we are a full year as this board, and so I just want to say thank you. I can't believe it's been a year. It seems like it's been forever, but it seems like just yesterday. So just thank you to all of you and the hard work that everyone puts in, and just being here for the right reasons. And I hope everyone has a good holiday.
I'm gonna add off of that. I thought about going last, but I'll use president's prerogative and speak again. But I think we should all be very proud of what we as a board have accomplished in 1 year of working together. We got a phenomenal superintendent that's making great changes for the impact of our students. We have refocused our strategic plan. We've set for board priorities and superintendent treasurer priorities and goals. We've had two-day retreats. We've done some really important and valuable work, and we've only just set the stage for what's yet to come. So we have a lot to be proud of. And trust me, it gets so much easier after the first year, because everything isn't new. I mean, we don't have to search for a superintendent next year either. So trust me, it gets so
Better
much
not.
easier after the first year.
Better not. Jeez. Oh.
Item J, number 1, executive session. Pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 121.22G1 is hereby moved the board adjourn to executive session for the purpose of considering the employment of a public employee.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Gomez?
Aye.
Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Ms. Schaefer?
Aye.
Ms. White?
Aye.
Ms. Coco?
Aye.
We're in executive session at 7:37 p.m. Before everyone leaves.